Hey, Islam family, peace and love. Back with another good one today. It's not gonna be necessarily a quick one this time, but this one here will be something that I think could be very helpful. Um, I think I realized what's going on when people come into the movement and they hear people saying proclaim your nationality, do status correction, things of that sort, and don't understand the dynamics of both or the differences and the subtleties to the differences. And, these are the things that make the difference and understand it, and is the reason why I think there is a split between the way people teach from in the temple, out of the temple, internet, so forth, wherever. I don't think for the most part, not everyone or everywhere is teaching this in this whole um, rounded perspective that I'm finna bring. And it's the issue with civil rights as well, you know, and why our people as a collective um, have had an issue, even with fighting for our rights as black people. Not to say that we shouldn't have been fighting for our rights or fighting for civil rights, but the civil rights movement in general benefits everyone, and it's opposed to when you understand what civil rights are versus the rights that are due to you inalienably, and also because of our national status. So, um, gonna start going in um, as I do. Statuses. There's a political and civil. I'm gonna start off going into the political side of things first. Let me see. I say we go to about right here. We don't need to go much further than that just to get started. Um, if you don't know what nationality is, who Moors are, you might want to go back and do more of a study and research on that. This is more of the part two lesson for people that understand that we are Moors, Moorish Americans, and things of that sort already. Um, I'm gonna go back and do from Square Zero video probably sometime before the end of the year, where I'm gonna really break that down so we can help and use for people that have never heard of Moors or don't know that we're Moors or may not necessarily have enough proof um, through history, evidence and documentation for them to understand the significance of identifying ourselves as Moors, and by nationality, and not as Black, Negro, African American, and these other colorable titles, or you could just say incorrect legal titles that have nothing to do pertaining to a nationality, and not even necessarily us having a problem with being identified by these things, but it's a time and place for everything. And in the public eye, you know, Moorish American or Moors is who we are. So for everyone that understands that, this video is for y'all, and for everyone going forward from there. Okay, so nationality, it deals with the collective, and when you go into the definition, um, basically, It's the relationship between a person and state, the collective. Um, but it's pertaining to the policy and administration of government, dealing with your allegiance at birth, national origin. Now, you do have the right to change your allegiance once you become of the right of age. And part of us proclaiming our nationality is to correct any wrongful presumptions that may have been there about what our national origins was at birth and then our allegiance going forward. Um, it's the laws the subject is citizen to part of your nation. I know Moors don't like to deal with citizen. It's a reason I capitalized it there. And if you're not familiar with a proper noun, you might want to go into that there and understand. And even when you look into citizen, the types of citizen, a national is a type of citizen. So yes, I understand that we Moors are nationals, but national is a type of citizen. Just plain and simple. There's no way of getting around that. So I'm not encumbering us by saying that we are citizens of our own government. And I want people to understand, that you shouldn't be scared of that and understand it. If we go somewhere, abroad, we're a Moorish national. Just like if someone from China comes over here, they're Chinese national. Someone from Mexican comes over here, they're Mexican national. That doesn't mean they don't retain Mexican citizenship or that citizenship to their particular body is necessarily even a bad thing. Which really actually brings me on to my next point on here, is dealing with political status for ours in Islam, in particular. Um, there's no separation of church and state, um, and that is to say that our religious society or community, the Moorish Science Temple of America and the Moorish Divine and National Movement, um, both being part of the community, and that pertaining to our national origin, I would have to say that not everybody in our community necessarily subscribes to traditional Islam or al Islam in the following of the Prophet Muhammad. So if you are a Hebrew Moor or a Christian Moor or more of any other faith, that doesn't necessarily um, it's not necessarily a deterrent in our community. We understand and accept all peoples, and just by you falling or identifying as a more Moorish American and falling under that identity and political jurisdiction, that doesn't necessarily mean that you practice the faith of Al Islam. Just for clarity, um, and I would even venture to say myself, not speaking for anyone, but I would say that Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple, did not teach Al Islam. He um, taught what he called Islamism, but from my research, you could say it's Sufism or Sufism, um, which in the traditional world of Islam, they would understand that as someone who does not necessarily um, believe directly in the Prophet Muhammad, but someone in their society that still is a part of the culture. Um, the teachings of Sufism are more like what Noble Drew Ali teaches in the arm, leg, arm, head, man, and guard is one, the higher self and the lower self. That's closer to what their teachings are. And, in the Jewish teachings, it would be more Kabbalistic, or in the Christian society, it would be more Gnostic. So I don't want anyone that is a newcomer to this information to necessarily be deterred by the fact that the Moorish society in general falls under the political jurisdiction of Islam. And it actually benefits us more than being under Christianity and the Christian black codes. So when it comes to civil status, let's go over here. And this all ties in directly, with what I was just saying. But when you proclaim your nationality, which is on the political side, the things that people call status correction fall in on the civil side when it comes to your civil status and civil rights. So your civil status, it deals with business, estates, contracts, families, and constitutionally protected rights, which in general are freedom of speech, voting, assembly, equitable tax, religion, and national origin, or in particular, no discrimination against religion or national origin. And I will underline those two in particularly dealing in your civil status, because when it comes to civil rights, those things that I just named and these two underline more particularly, as you'll see, they come together when you're a Moor, as a Moorish American. Now, civil rights, excuse me, let me get it straight. We're going to define, and this is a combination of definitions I put together basically from a few different sources, and I'm going to show sources on this in a moment, but basically put them all together to really break down so people can understand the definition of what it is and what's going on. Now, like I said, your civil rights, these are constitutionally protected rights, and these also are privileges, immunities, or you could say liberties. They call them different things in different places, so you have to understand that from the very beginning before I start breaking down this other stuff, because when you read different documents, in law, constitutions versus bills and things of that sort, codes, they may call something a privilege, immunity, or a liberty as opposed to a civil right, but I want y'all to understand that these are all synonymous. So these are all constitutionally protected rights belonging to an individual. So civil rights are rights that belong to an individual. Now, that there takes it out of the collective already from nationality. Okay, but let's keep going. All right, these are rights belonging to an individual owing to his status as a citizen or resident, and they're different colors for a reason, of a country or a community. And I put in within the United States, because we're going in on the definition in American law right now, because certain things do change up once you get outside of American law into international law. But civil rights, belong to an individual. These are individual owing to his status as a citizen or resident. So citizens and residents both are entitled to civil rights, being part of a country or community, in the United States. Now, didn't I just say that the Moorish Science Temple of America and the Moorish Divine and National movement or a community within the United States. Well, I didn't say they're within the United States, but they are a community. I'd say they're without the United States. The United States is technically infringing upon our land, but it's through contract, so it's not necessarily infringement. But okay, these are rights protected from infringement by social organization, private individuals, or government. So civil rights in general, um, these are constitutionally protected. You know, whether you want to say rights, immunities, liberties, um, and they protect you from all of these, whether it's an organization, private individual, or government. Now, let's go to this next word definition. A lot of Moors already know this, but if y'all don't, this is going to really bring things to perspective for people who may have not heard this. And then it's really going to go, then I'm going to go into civil rights in general. But civiliter mortuus, it's civilly dead. Um, Most people know the Black's Law, or Moors know the Black's Law definition, dead in the eyes of the law. But it's a person that's a fugitive or a slave, someone who has lost almost all civil rights, a fugitive or a slave. So these two conditions uh, are almost synonymous, technically in law, since the passing of the 13th and the 14th Amendment. Um, because slavery was abolished except for um, commission of a crime, and fugitive is someone who's escaped, you know, or in the sense of a slave, which, you know, they said slavery ended. Um, but the issue, when it came down to our people getting out of slavery, um, by not identifying properly, we lost or converted our status over. Our civil and our political statuses over. So they were able to infringe by contracts and other means on that status. But, and let's go back over to the political side of these things. Um, 1865, Dred Scott versus Sanford. Um, it says that the Constitution did not apply to African Americans because they were not citizens when it was written. So, when it comes to civil rights, if African Americans, yeah, that's how it, yeah, okay, I wrote it how it was when I looked it up. As African Americans, you could say blacks, coloreds, Negroes. If we were not citizens of the United States but slaves, um, and then become free, that wouldn't necessarily make you a citizen, but you would still qualify as a resident. Now, civil rights do apply to residents, indeed. Residents of a country or a community in the United States. So, one of the biggest issues when it comes to civil rights is that even the lawyers that got involved with the civil rights movement should have looked as deeply into it as I'm looking at, and maybe they did, and you know, we're selling our people out. I can't say what was going on in these people's minds, but I can tell you from what's going on in mine and from my research right now. Sorry about that. Somebody called me a video. Um, Thing is, the civil rights movement could have been and still could, civil rights could be enforced if you bring in the religion and national origin perspective of it. Because without that behind it, you're relying on color, which race, is one of the things they talk about in civil rights, but I didn't even put that in here because it's a construct. It's a lawful construct or a legal construct, but it's not as tangible as religion or national origin. So, you could technically argue that, Moors have a better claim to civil rights than Negroes, blacks, and colors because, one, we're not slaves, property of those black codes, but also we're residents of a community um, in America. I wouldn't even say we're in the United States. We're in America. But let's go a little bit deeper. 10 years before the Dred Scott case, 1855, Lincoln, that's Abraham Lincoln. In the Dungy case, Dungy versus Spencer. See, I can look this case up later. And I'm going to show all the evidence and proof of this later. I'm going to go back and show sources. But I want to say and make this point that Abraham Lincoln, in this case, in 1855, he won a slander case where he argued to the judge, my client is not a Negro. Though it's a crime to be a Negro, it's no crime to be born with black skin. And I mean, he was meaning over here in American law. This was United States case. He said, I say my client may be a Moor, but he is not a Negro, meaning not African American or black. It was a slander case from I want to say it was his brother-in-law calling him Black Bill or something like that. I'm going to come back and show y'all, all the sources from that. But 10 years before the Dred Scott case, we had who would be the future president, Abraham Lincoln, argue a civil rights issue, basically. A small case of slander, where this guy was saying, hey, I am not black, I'm a Moor. And they won. I don't know if y'all know how powerful that is. I mean, that's one of them boom, boom, boom bombs going off right now. Like, if it didn't connect in your mind, the only thing I can do further, I think, get up out of here, is to show sources. So, let's show sources now. Civil rights. That's freedictionary.com. Personal liberties. There go that word I was talking about. That belong to an individual owing his status as a citizen, resident of a particular country or community. Most common legal application of the term civil rights involves rights guaranteed to U.S. citizens and residents by legislation and by the Constitution. I mean, I don't think I need to go too deep into this. Y'all can look this up. Y'all saw the source. I think it was the free one. Privileges and immunities, and it talks about what that is. Keep going, keep going. 1857. I wrote it as 1855. Okay, I was 2 years off. I'm looking at my board now. But yeah, Supreme Court held in Dred Scott versus Sanford, That the Constitution did not apply to African Americans because they were not citizens when the Constitution was written. After the war, new laws were necessary. They came up with the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, you know, trying to change them things. But, if you know those weren't properly ratified anyway, I can go into that. That's a longer story, but I just wanted to show sources to the things that I've been teaching. Uh, the Ku Klux Klan Act, that's a good one. Not even gonna go into that at this time. I'll go into that one later. But Jim Crow laws and the black codes. It's the Christian black codes in particular. Y'all can go look these up if you need further resources. But I just wanted to show people what it is that I'm talking about. Yeah, and they were uh effectively negated for most African Americans in the 19th century, in the late 19th century. Well, we know what these are. I don't think I have to go too deep into all of this here. Civiliter mortus. Civilly dead, one who is considered as if he were naturally dead. Uh, they say go far as his rights are concerned. I think it's supposed to mean as far as his rights are concerned. I'd be finding that even in, this is Black's Law, second edition online. And, but either way, civil little mortals, dead in God's law, one is dead with their right, in accordance with their rights. So as far as his rights are concerned, that's the second edition. Most people know the fourth edition version, but pretty much same thing. This is a legal maxim dealing with civil little mortals. I don't want to even try and butcher that, but what it says is one out of the pale of law is civilly dead, and I think that's really really interesting if you've ever looked into the legal definition of color, because pale would be considered color. So one out of the color of law is civilly dead. Is how I saw that, But hey, I don't want to implant that on you if that's not how you interpret it, but we can discuss it. Um, According to this legal maxim, a person who is a fugitive, who's escaped from captivity and hiding, considered to be legally dead or civilly dead. Excuse me. I mean that's legally dead, civilly, but I'm reading from real small on my phone. Yeah, pardon me. Um, yeah, that's dealing more with that civil little mortus. Okay. This is the Dungy case. Lincoln paired with a defense that memorialized his superior legal mind, elevated the complexity of the social construct of race, and emphasized the criminalization of being a Negro or black person in the United States. Excuse me. Despite his client sitting in the courtroom with the face of a black man with a light complexion, Lincoln's argument was simple. Danger was not a Negro. He was not black because his ancestral origins were of Portuguese descent, not the ambiguous, non-specific ancestry of being Negro or black. I don't know if y'all caught that. I tried to emphasize what was important. I'm going to go on. My client is not a Negro. Though it's a crime to be a Negro, no crime to be born with black skin, but my client is not a Negro. His skin may not be as white as ours. It wasn't white at all. But I say he is not a Negro, though he may be a Moor. Mr. Lincoln, interrupted Judge Davis, scarcely able to restrain a smile. You mean a Moor, Moor, not Moore, Moore. Now, Lincoln, well, Your Honor, Moore, Moor, not C.H. Moore, Moore, as the name Moore, replied Mr. Lincoln, with a sweep of his long arm toward the table where Moore and I sat. There was somebody there with the last name Moore. I say, my client may be a Moor, Moor, but he is not a Negro. And Lincoln won this case because his client knew his ancestral origins were Portuguese descent and not ambiguous, non-specific ancestry of being Negro or black. Now, didn't I say in specific, civil rights deals with religion and national origin. So he was a Moor, a Moor, because he knew his national origins, Portuguese descent, not the ambiguous, non-specific ancestry of being Negro or black. Now, let's keep going. Slavery, still in effect in much of the nation. So this was before slavery was ended, because remember, they said Lincoln was the one that freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. So this was during slavery, before what they call the Civil War. This Moor, Moor, not Moore, as said in the court case specifically. And this is law, people. So slavery was still affecting the nation. Lincoln was not seeking to absolve all people with skin that might be misinterpreted as black of the crime of being Negro. He was simply drawing a distinction that one could identify their ancestral origins of something other than black to a specific culture, people, group, or nation. Was not subject to the same statuses. Statute, excuse me, but it's the same thing that the government that governed those who were or who had been shamed, they had been slandered, they had been marked, branded with the badge of blackness. I know I changed it up, but I had to. But I know anyone with real common sense saw the point of what I was just saying. It is the status of a Moor. And if you didn't stick around to the end, and one of these people that missed out because they like the short videos, I couldn't give you a short one today, I'm sorry. Y'all tell them people to come back and rewatch this. But even during the time of slavery, so if during the time of slavery they recognize the status of Moors over Negroes, blacks, do you really think that they won't recognize it now, people? I mean, hit me up, email me. Walter Bay, the number 7 more, gmail.com, if y'all want to do something about your status and all of that there. Before he was president, Abraham Lincoln. And the man who refused to be called Negro. My client is not a Negro, though it's a crime to be a Negro. Abraham Lincoln Esquire. Esquire's lawyer, 1855. Okay. Maybe that's why I got 1855, even though it said 1857 on the last one. Hey. Uh, Around that same time, Huffington Post did an article on this. I didn't realize that's who I was using as a source on this one, but there are plenty of other ones. You can go look this up. This one is probably in the Library of Congress or something somewhere. But hey, I mean, if you didn't catch it, not much more I can say. But if you did catch what I'm saying and you want to do something about it, hit me up. I appreciate everybody for watching to the end of this. Um, Shout out to everyone on my Patreon. Everybody come check me out over there. And we got some real interesting things coming up this year. We're finna be going real deep into setting up local government this year, into trust, and the things that come behind that. Um, get at me for more information. Peace and love, family.